You know, there are some questions that just stick with us. They've been around forever, and they're not just some abstract philosophical puzzle. They hit us right where we live. And this is probably the biggest one of them all.
Yeah, that's the one, right? If God is supposed to be all good and all powerful, then why is the world so full of suffering? I mean, you see it every day. You turn on the news, you hear about a natural disaster, you see things that are just heartbreakingly unfair. And you just have to ask, what's going on here? If someone's in charge, why does this happen?
So that gut feeling, that emotional punch, that's where this whole thing starts. But philosophers, well, they do what they do best. They take that raw feeling and they turn it into a formal argument. It's like taking a tangled knot of emotion and carefully laying out each thread to see exactly how it's all connected, or where it breaks.
Okay, so before we can even dive into the argument, we have to agree on the terms. These are the ground rules for the debate. We're talking about a very specific idea of God here, the one from classical philosophy. This God has three big qualities: omnipotent, meaning all-powerful; omniscient, all-knowing; and morally perfect, all good. This definition is absolutely crucial for everything that follows.
All right, let's break down the logic. It's laid out here almost like a proof in a math class. It goes something like this. If this type of God exists, then that God would have the power to get rid of evil. He'd know about all the evil, and, being perfectly good, he'd want to get rid of it. Okay, all that seems to follow from the definition. But then you hit step 5. Evil exists. I mean, just look around. And that's the clash. The argument concludes that you can't have it both ways. All those first 4 points and the reality of evil can't coexist. Something's got to give, and the argument says, maybe it's God.
And look, this isn't just some thought experiment for an armchair philosopher. As the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy points out, this is a huge deal. This is one of the most serious, powerful arguments against the existence of God that has ever been formulated. It has real weight.
So where do we go from here? Well, the conversation gets a little more nuanced. Philosophers have basically split this big problem into two different kinds of arguments. They're related, but they're trying to prove very different things.
So on the one hand, you've got the logical problem. This is the checkmate argument. It's trying to prove that God and evil are a flat-out contradiction, like a square circle. It's saying it is logically impossible for both to exist. But then, on the other hand, there's the evidential problem. This one is more like a courtroom drama. It's not aiming for a logical proof, it's building a case based on evidence. It points to all the suffering in the world and asks the jury, us, given the sheer amount and the horrible types of evil we see, is it really likely that a good God is in charge?
And, honestly, most of the modern debate happens right here, with the evidential problem. You might be wondering why. Well, the logical checkmate argument is tough, but you can arguably escape it by saying, well, it's possible God has a reason we don't know about. But the evidential argument, it's just so much more powerful emotionally. It doesn't ask if it's possible. It points to something like a fawn suffering horribly in a forest fire and asks, is it really plausible? Is it probable that there's a good reason for that specific, gut-wrenching, seemingly pointless suffering?
So, faced with this massive challenge, what's the response? Well, Christian thinkers haven't just thrown up their hands. Over the centuries, they've developed some really sophisticated answers. You can basically group them into 3 main strategies, 3 different paths they take to try and navigate this problem.
Now, we've got what are called total refutations, defenses, and theodicies. And as we'll see, they each have a very different level of ambition.
First up is the total refutation. This is the most aggressive move on the board. It basically says the whole argument is flawed from the get-go. It's like saying, wait a minute, who are we, with our limited little human brains, to look at the universe and decide what counts as evil or pointless suffering from God's perspective? It tries to shut down the problem before it can even get started.
Then you've got the defense. This one's much more modest. It's not trying to give you the answer for why evil exists. Not at all. Its only job is to poke holes in that logical checkmate argument. It just wants to show that it's possible God has a good reason, even if we have no idea what it is. The goal here is just to create reasonable doubt, to show that God and evil aren't a guaranteed contradiction.
And finally, we have the theodicy. Now, this is the big one. This is the most ambitious play. A theodicy looks at the defense saying, maybe there's a reason, and says, nope, not good enough. I'm going to tell you exactly what that reason is. It's a full-blown attempt to justify God's actions and explain why suffering is actually part of the plan.
All right, so to make this all a bit more concrete, let's look at probably the most famous theodicy of all time. You've almost certainly heard some version of it. It's called the free will theodicy.
The core idea is actually pretty powerful. It argues that a world where people can freely choose to be good and to love,
Well, that's way better than a world full of puppets or robots who are just programmed to do the right thing. But, and this is a huge but, for that freedom to be real, the choice to do evil has to be real too. And that comes with a massive, terrible risk.
So here's how the logic works. Premise 1, real, genuine free will is an incredible good. Premise 2, for freedom to be real, the possibility of choosing evil has to be on the table. And here's the crucial part. An all-powerful God can't do something that's logically impossible. He can't create a rock so heavy you can't lift it, and he can't force you to freely love him. It's a contradiction. So, the conclusion is that God made a calculated choice. Creating a world with free beings was worth the risk of all the moral evil that might come with it.
Okay, that makes some sense for things like war, theft, human-on-human evil. But wait a second. What about earthquakes? What about cancer? What about that fawn in the forest fire we talked about? None of that has anything to do with human free will. So what gives?
And that right there is the biggest problem for the free will theodicy. It's a pretty compelling explanation for what we call moral evil, the bad stuff people do. But for natural evil, all the suffering that just happens in nature, it doesn't seem to have a good answer. It just hits a wall.
So what's the big takeaway here? Is that the problem of evil isn't some puzzle you can just solve and put away. It's more like a rabbit hole. Every answer you find just leads to more questions. This isn't ancient history. It's a debate that is very much alive and kicking today.
And so that leaves us with a final, massive question to think about. When you look at all the suffering in the world, does that force you to reconsider the whole idea of an all-good, all-powerful God, or does it force you to reconsider what good even means? Maybe our human understanding of goodness is just too small to grasp the full picture. And that is the question that just hangs in the air.